Alright, this is a 2007 Subaru Tribeca. The goal is to swap the engine here today. Well, I already removed all these areas. I just removed this power steering reservoir from the corner there. I took the whole bracket out and I kept the two of the bolts. That'll be if those guys, I kept them back on there so I don't lose them. And I removed this the plumbing for the air intakes, the air filter, and with this entire assembly down there. This guy is the cover of the whole engine. It used to be on there. This is 3.0 EZ30D engine, I believe. Maybe I was wrong, but you'll find out what engine is that. So already disconnected one of the electrical wire. This is for the mass airflow sensor. Next thing to do is I want to make more room for the front. I need to remove this the radiator is hiding underneath. I'm not too sure if I'm going to remove it, but definitely I'm going to take out this plastic piece by removing all those the clips around there. Yeah, and just keep moving. Well, this engine has have a head gasket issues. I've been trying to cope with it until recently. I just keep having this check engine light on, and it continuously has the check engine light flashing, and it was saying the cylinder number 1 is the misfiring. Cylinder number 1 is somewhere on this corner, the first one facing on this corner, and I can see there's some dripping on the exhaust manifold as well. So this engine's on its way going, and I already ordered a used engine, which is a JDM spec. So this engine is gonna come out, and we're gonna put in a new one or a used one. And now, in order to make more room for this guy to come out, because you can see this engine, it ends up pretty much here. It's gonna be really very tight if to come out vertically. So my goal is to remove this cross member here, and just removing this bolt and that bolt and the two over there. Hopefully this beam will be coming out, and then we have all the room we need here. And just to be preventative, either I'm gonna remove the radiator or I'm gonna just put some. Yeah, I think I'll just remove the radiator, make more room for it, make it easier. Okay, let's go back to work. Okay, a few minutes passed by. I have removed the 3 bolts on this side and 3 bolts on that side. Also, take off the 3 bolts for the latch and put it back. So the latch will stay down here, and this guy is pretty much loose. And I just need to disconnect it from the lower bolts, so this cross beam can come out, and it'll make us a huge room to maneuver when we take the engine out. Also, you see this area is all empty. I take out the battery already. It's sitting on the floor over there. And next step is taking out the belts, and then I'll drain the radiator. Well, it was a half drain already because it's burning so much coolant. So let's keep going. Before I lift the vehicle, you can see I already removed all the belts. Removing the belts is you just need to find the tensioner, which is this guy. Just go put a 14mm wrench on it and go clockwise. So when you turn this way, it moves the pulley that way and give some room. You can just peel off the belt. Also, you can see all the connector to the radiator. This guy is gone. This hose is gone. The one underneath is all disconnected. So next step was I'm going to raise it up and drain the oil and the coolant from the vehicle. The oil is draining right now. As you can see, the drain plug is still dripping. I removed the oil filter on this side too. This is the guy where the oil filter used to be. It's this guy right here. And start looking at what are the future things need to be disconnected. There's the oil pressure sensor. There's another wire behind it. So the manifold, the exhaust manifold bolts. Also, since we're already down here, these are those 2 bolts for this the vertical piece. It goes to the cross member on the top. We need to take out those 2 bolts. On this side, we disconnect the lower radiator hose. The thermostatic side, we just disconnect it right here, and also there too. And all those exhaust manifold bolts. And also the wire for the negative grounding wire need to be taken out, and just see as much as we can to get them start to disconnect it. And we eventually gonna have to go up and down a couple of times to make sure everything's all disconnected before we dismember the engine to the transmission. Okay, let's get going. New engine just showed up. Looks fairly dry. Those are the the JDM engine, Japanese domestic market engines. So they're usually around 100,000 kilometers or 50 to 80,000 miles. Come with the power steering pump, AC compressor, alternator, everything. I'm probably gonna just use all the things they had. Looks pretty good, but I do have to use my own manifold because the intake and exhaust are a little different between the Japanese market and the Canadian market. So yeah, looks pretty good. And for my part here so far, I have so exhaust is already removed on both sides, radiator hose removed. I have this is actually the heater core, which is this guy. It's usually you plug in when it's very cold, and the other one's maybe the pressure sensor for the oil. And yeah, just to work my way along, and I was about to take my what do you call it, this is the engine seat. Just take those bolts out so it's easy to come out, or it's ready to go. And yeah, just keep my way. Got the car down again. I've already removed this middle piece here, so that's this guy. This actually has some of the electrical wires hooked to it, so you just already put it down. This is the one. It has those tabs goes across the vertical piece, so you squeeze the two ends and pushes through the hole. They'll free up. Those two ones are the plugs going to the two fans, so just get them pressed in, pull out, and they can remove it. My next goal is to remove these two together, the fan and the radiator. Next thing is those two, this guy and the one underneath, those are the transmission lines going into the radiator. They share the same cooling system. So just need to disconnect them, put a bolt to it, and preventing any leak out from there, and see if I can just pull this whole rad out, and then I'm gonna start to disconnect everything else on this engine. Okay, so far I've removed the radiator. So two of the lines for the tranny, you see I put a big bolt into it, just preventing any leak out. One of them there, another one's probably hiding somewhere in the back, or oh, right here, this guy. And this, you have to separate this AC condenser from the radiator. What it does is you see this little bracket, there's a bolt coming at the front, bolts onto the bracket of the radiator. So there are 4 of them on the 4 corner. Once you get rid of those 4, then you separate the radiator from the AC condenser. Then you can pull it out just like that. Then you can just try to drain out all the coolant from it. Now the next step I will be trying to do is remove the power steering pump, push to the side, remove the AC compressor, push to that side, and start to disconnecting all the wiring around this engine, and also the intake manifold. I'll see how bad is it in the way. If it is, then I'll definitely take it out. If it's not, then probably I'll leave it for the majority of it. That's just a bracket for holding the wirings connecting to the alternator. Okay, let me take a break and I'll go back. Okay, I worked a little more on this thing. As you can see, there's used to be a cover on it. I took it off, and that's this guy on the floor, and also the other one on the driver's side as well. Mostly is the 12mm bolts holding them up. The reason for doing that is because I have to take this manifold out. Number one is this little pressure sensor from the new one is already broken, so I have to reuse my manifold. Number two is when I was trying to remove this this is a power steering pump. There's 2 bolts in the front, one on the left and one on the right. You have to just take advantage of rotate it to where the hole is to access the bolt. I believe it was a 12mm. And also it has a 14mm bolt in the back. And it's already all the way out. It's hitting something in the back. And that was a hose in there, so I think it's easier for me to just remove the entire manifold and to getting more access to it. And also because I need to get a hold of remove this bolt to remove the AC compressor, and I already did this guy. You see how long this bolt comes out? It's gonna be this long, and right now it's going to be hitting the plastic of the manifold, so I have to remove the intake manifold in order to remove that bolt. And also I think a couple more bolts down there for removing this AC compressor. Okay, so I'm going to take another break and come back working on this a little more. Okay, I made a few more progress. As you can see, this AC compressor is now on the side. It's put over there, and this alternator is being taken out. It's sitting right here. Couple difficulty thing is that the alternator, there's just two bolts, one long, one short. But after removing those bolts, in order to access one of the bolts, there's a pulley here you have to remove first. This pulley was actually sitting right on the compressor bracket, so you have to remove that pulley to access that bolt. And then you can take you probably need a pry bar to remove the alternator. Remove the alternator gives you access to removing the AC compressor. You're going to remove 1, 2, I think it's 3 is here, and the 4th bolt is this guy. Removing those 4 bolts, the alternator bracket goes outside. It took me a little effort to try to figure out, and I think my next step was I also removed one of the knock sensor inside, which is the little couple bolts inside. One is a bracket for this pipe. I'm trying to remove so I have more access to this big bolt behind this power steering pump. And I'll remove this intake manifold now, just trying to remove a few of those bolts on each side, and this thing should be able to just lift up. Was a little struggling trying to disconnect this vacuum hose from the manifold, but I made it. So just be patient and work on step by step and you'll get it. Let's get some updates here. I finally got this power steering assembly out. I managed to get this guy out too, but actually you don't need to do that. There was on the bracket, you just want to hit this hole and the other one, and also the one in the front, which is this guy. So once you get that 3 bolts out, which is there, 1, 2, 3, then this whole bracket falls out. I don't need to fight with those the big bolt in the back. Anyway, and I got my intake manifold is all loosened up and all disconnected, but I just realized actually the fuel rail is attached to it too, so I'm just trying to disconnect the fuel rail so I can take this intake manifold out. It was a little bit fighting with this fuel line connector, but there's a few YouTube videos out there you can watch and get some hint out of it. Eventually I'll make my tool work, so you can probably get that done too. All right, let me keep working and I'll give you an update in a bit. Time to get some updates. So far I gave up on removing this manifold because it's way too much work and it's easier to do it on the floor, and there's a couple components to swap out anyway. So far my goal is already disconnect the radiator hose, sorry, not rad hose, the 2 of the connectors. Don't know if you can see it there. This guy's disconnected. Come on folks, those 2 of those goes into the back side of it for going into a heater core to supply the heat to the car. Just got those 2 disconnected. It was a fight to get them off. The next thing I'm gonna focus to do is disconnect the, if you can see, where was it? It was here. This piece of plastic or rubberish grommet that was on there, it was somewhere inside of here. Just have to pry it off so I can have access to the 4 bolts, connects the flex plate to the torque converter if you come to look at the new ones. So you have only 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, and the access hole is right here on the top. So this guy was sitting right on there. Okay, so my goal will be removing these 4 bolts which connect the flex plate to the torque converter, and then I'll start to removing all the bolts connecting the engine to the what do you call it, to the transmission. Wish me good luck. Ready to remove the first connecting bolt between the flex plate and the torque converter. This is the 22 mil with the breaker bar. It has to put onto your crank or the pulley in the front, and you turn only clockwise, otherwise it could jump. Then you can see down here, don't know if you can see that, there's a bolt right down there, and I have my super, well, where is it, super long extension. I'm going to stand forward to hit that bolt. And when you're trying to remove the bolt, you're gonna one hand holding on to the, where is it? Come on. Holding on to the pry bar, or the breaker bar. Another hand is just trying to turn it counterclockwise. So gonna be fun. Four bolts are removed. Those are tiny 12mm bolts, but they're stupid tight. When you get your ratchet wrench on there or whatever, just when you loosen it up, it feels like you broke the bolt. It's just a huge snap, and then it actually just went loose. And also, I'm surprised that there's no like Loctite on those threads. I might put some blue Loctite on there when I put it back in. So 4 bolts out, and the next thing to do will be removing all the bolts connecting the bell housing to the engine, and hopefully we can start to lifting up the engine. All right. Right now I'm trying to remove all the connecting bolts between the bell housing to the engine on the passenger side. As you can see, I already removed that. I think this is the EGR valve. Well, I'm not too sure anyway. It has the, I'm not too sure what this is, but it does have the vacuum control lines. So I'm going to disconnect this line to make more room available. Already removed a few of the bolts on the top, compared to something like one here, one small one 12mm down here. You probably won't see there's another one 14 down here, so that's a 3. In the bottom I have 2 more bolts and 1 more nut on this side, and I'll be done. And I'll move to the driver's side. But it's just getting a little hard to work in this area, so I'm going to disconnect this line and take out this cylinder shaped stuff, vacuum controlled. God knows what that is. Right, so time for updates again. And I did all the big bolts for the passenger side, so all those bolts are all gone. I already loosened up the last one here. It was only finger tight right now. I started working on the driver's side. The first one I took out was the one that goes in right here, and it's super long. It's like this big, and because it goes into this the little piece of plate for the grounding nut to the grounding wire, and things it's pretty cluster over here, so I'll be trying to remove a few things to make it more room, make it easier to work around. The first thing I might just take it apart will be this cable, the cable going to the starter in the back. I'm not going to touch the starter, but I just want to remove this cable to make more room, so my breaker bar is easier for the breaker bar to go in to loosen up all those big bolts. Okay, let's keep working. A little more update here. I end up removing most of the bolts on the driver's side. Actually, I did it from underneath, so I jack up the car and just used the super long extension here. So I used a swivel here, and that was a 3/8, so I have to use adapter. Then there's 3/4 pieces of the 1/2-inch extensions put out together. So still have a 1, can't really get it. So right now I'm still working on it, and also updated for this the AC compressor. I take it off from the bracket. As you can see, we have to use the bracket for lifting the engine. So that's what I did so far. And it's been late, so I'm gonna take a break. Okay, the last update today. Before I go home, I thought give it another try. I just realized the last bolt I was having trouble with, it was blocked by the starter. So eventually I have to just take the starter apart, or not apart, just take it off. So after taking off the starter, then this is the guy. So then I have no problem accessing the last one. Right now, just everything just connected by the last little bolt right here. Don't know if you can see it. My fingers right there. Yeah, so I should be able to lift it up a little bit, and then I'll just start to see if I can separate them and put a jack underneath the transmission to make up the angle for it, make it easier for separation. But that'll be tomorrow's job. Okay, that's enough for today. And for the updates again. So far what I did is, I think I separated everything already. So I hook it up with the bracket here with a chain on the back. And I also have a jack on here for supporting the transmission. Also put a piece of 2x4 on top of it. Now, as you can see, there's already made a little gap. I'll explain the back right now. Okay, now my gap is big enough for me to put a screwdriver in there, and if I pry on it, I can make it a little bit bigger, I think. Or maybe that's just my illusion, I'm damaging the aluminum. Anyway, so it took me a little while to figure it out. You have to lift the engine high enough to clear the mount, because the mount has a bolt sits into a slot on the subframe, so I have to clear the bolt first. Number two, you have to jack up the transmission high enough to take off the stress, the weight from the engine. So there's two bolts in the very bottom line up the transmission and the engine. You have to free them up. There's no stress on those two bolts going through. Then you can slowly rock it back and forth to get the engine out. I can see the tension is pretty high right now, and I did press down the lever quite hard on that transmission, on that jack to support transmission as well. And then at the same time, I've been doing rocking it back and forth and lower down this the engine and pick it up again, lower down again to gradually open up the gap until the gap is big enough. I can probably put some tool in there to pry it open a little bit more. Then I can eventually separate the engine. All right, let me keep working. As you can see, one thing I didn't do right is in the bottom I have a shield covers the transmission and this guy and the engine. I did not take that piece off. I thought that was a part of the transmission, so I didn't really take it. It's actually part of the engine. There's just a couple screws, but it's too late to do it now. So I'm just and also the engine's a little on a crooked, leaning forward because I was trying to free that pressure on that back end. But anyway, things are already there. I'll just keep lifting it up and make sure I clear the transmission, and I'll just keep keep pushing the lifting the engine up, and hope I think nothing's in the way right now. Like this AC line is catching on the corner a little bit, but it's not a big deal. I think the left side is all good too, if my calculation's okay. All right, let me keep pulling and move the engine out. Now this is the old engines out and leaving the space here. When I was pulling the engine out, this torque converter was pulled out a little bit, and just pushed it back in and make sure it's free to rotate. If that's free to rotate, then that's a sign it's still good. And make sure there's otherwise there's a ouch, I just cut my finger maybe. Anyway, just be mindful when working around metals, it can cut you easily. I think I might just cut my knuckle under the glove. So this is the perfect time to give a rinse to clean up all the build-up. I'm gonna degrease a little bit and spray it with the warm water and get the engine, swap a couple components. So the those JDM engines, you know, this guy's broken, but you can still probably just swap from the other one. And one thing is their vacuum line. This side is actually blocked off, and this side is open with a hose, which is opposite from the North American version, because in Japan the brake booster for the brakes is actually on this side, on the right hand side, and on North America is on the driver's side, or on the left hand side. So I'll do some research, see if I can just swap those connectors and make everything work, so I can without doing all the swapping of the manifold, because it's way too much work. And also they have a couple broken components, like this plug is not even good anymore, it looks like. And you can see on the side it's sheared off, which is supposed to be something like that. So apparently this piece is broken when they remove the engine. I can easily swap this to the other engine, and I think there's a couple other ones that are broken too. So there's some preparations, and also I have to remove their power steering pump, because this pump does not fit with all the holes, like the orientation of the connectors. Doesn't work on the power steering pump I have. That one will be gone, AC compressor will be gone, alternator will be gone, and then I'll go from there. Whew. Do some updates now. So far I have swapped a couple components. You can see there's a hole here from the old one because I put it into there. The connector is broken. Then I realized here, you can see this connector is broken from this corner as well. So I need to swap that one too. And also what they did is in the bottom here, you can see I made a mess because, where was it? This guy, there's all these it's more like a VVT valves. It's all swapped out from the old engine, and you can see it's that's the flange with all the oil on the floor. That one's being swapped out, so I just need to do that one too. Also, I pulled out all the ignition coils. I'm going to keep the new ones, but I did put in the new spark plugs maybe 5,000 or 8,000 kilometers ago, so I would like to reuse those, and I'll look at the condition of the new engine. Then pick whoever has better spark plugs. Okay, let's keep going. Without cylinder number 1, actually I was wrong before. Cylinder number 1 is the passenger side, the front first one. That's the one keep misfiring, and this is the one out. I already cleaned it up a little bit. You can see lots of a black silt was a build up. So that one is probably it's a fold. So if that, come on focus, if I already sprayed a lot of brake clean and wiped on it, but there's too much of black carbon buildup, it probably is already foiled. So I'm not going to reuse this guy. It's going to be garbage. I'll probably just reuse whatever I pull out from the engine from the sorry, the new engine. Yeah, this is the one that came out, I think. Come on, I just measured it. The new one was, or the new engine comes at the gap as a 0.033-ish, and all my old ones are 0.031-ish. So they're pretty close, honestly. Yeah, so I'm just throw away my cylinder number 1 spark plug and reuse all my other 5. The broken solenoid valve, sorry, probably called the VVT valve actuator, whatever you call it, was on there because this connector was sheared off, which is this guy. And when I pull it out, it was like that. If you just pulling the center part out, then the shell stays in there. This is what actuates and allowing different passage of the oil gallery, or when I'm moving. So actuates a different function. This is the one from my engine. So that's the good one. I'm going to swap it out here. Okay. Make sure you pass the O-ring and make sure I don't break it. Okay, it sits in. And also this guy, the connectors broke off from this Y plug. Whoever, when they were taking this thing apart in Japan, in fact, they didn't do a good job. I think this is the pressure sensor inside. That's what it feels like. Actuator has multiple wires to do different positioning, and this is just a 2-wire, I believe. Yeah. Anyhow, keep moving for the engine to go back in again. So transfer those 2 bolts from the old one to the new one. These are the 2 dowel pins from the new engine. Used to be a one stuck on here, got that one removed, the dowel pin. And tie my compressor to the side, AC compressor, and get everything prepared. Swapped all those broken components on the edge, on the end. Swapped the whole assembly here, make sure all plugs are good. And the solenoid is good. The other one is good, seems like. Okay, let's drop it in. Time for updates again. Got this engine lined up. Ooh, I don't want to push the back inwards a bit because I don't want this gap to be opened up again. What you do is you line up the 2 studs underneath. Don't know if you can see it now, but you have to line up those 2 studs in the bottom. You have to jack up your transmission high enough to make everything line up. And then you have to make sure the engine seat is clearing the frame. You have to just run your finger underneath, feels like it's freed up. There's enough clearance to run through. You have to jack up the transmission high enough, and then you just push it inwards. And rock it back and forth and make those couple dowel pins to line up. I think the gap just gets a little smaller again. Yeah, just keep doing that, and eventually it's enough for you to put a bolt in there. Just slowly tie them up. Okay, engine has dropped in. You can see the gap is not so much, maybe it's only 1/8 right now, and I just when the whole time I was just keeping this bolt as finger tight, just keep them closing together. With this gap, your dowel should be already lined up, and the engine's already, the seats already into the slot, so everything should be all good to go. Nothing get caught, everything still moves. So I'm gonna go for a break and come back to do the plumbings, and hopefully I can drive this car home tonight. All right, after lunch, now I'm putting everything back in together. Mostly I just started putting all the bolts back in between the bell housing to the engines. On the passenger side, it's pretty much all done. On the driver side, I put in the first one that requires the starter to access it. So I'm not going to do the starter until I put all those connecting bolts between the flex plate and the converters, the torque converters, those 4 bolts. So I need to get those 4 done first, and then I will put a starter back in. And then just do everything reversely and just reconnect the whatever things was disconnected before, and just put everything back in. Plumbing on vacuum lines and coolant lines, oil lines, and electrical lines. Alright, should be pretty straightforward. Okay, the final updates. I got this engine swapped and started, and it came out with a P0082 coat, which is a left side of solenoid valve for the intake side, which is this guy. I swapped it already, but still the same thing, and still doing a diagnose. But other than that, this project is pretty much completed. And yeah, let me know what you think about it. Thanks for watching.